Hello and welcome back to the channel, where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review. With us today, taking a look at the demolition-based racer Destruction Derby, which originally saw release on the PlayStation back in October of 1995 before being ported to the Saturn and originally released in the PAL region in August of 1996 and then Japan in October of the same year. It did not get a release in North America, which surprises me because I imagine this kind of racing game would be fairly popular over there. Like always, we'll be talking about how it looks, how it sounds, how it plays, content and lifespan, and ultimately whether it's still worth playing today and has the quality to make our PAL or worldwide Saturn top 10s. So once you hit the main menu, which I think isn't particularly good to navigate, you'll see you've got a choice of car select, track select, mode select, and options. Heading into options, you've got a few audio things that you can tweak. You can check the fastest laps, and you can also check the control pad layout. So once you hit the mode select screen, you'll see you've got wrecking racing, stock car racing, destruction derby, and time trials. Picking one of the top three will give you a few more options. You've got race practice, championship, multiplayer, and duel.
Our first race of the season. Go!
So like always, I'm going to start with the visuals first, and I think I'd be fair in saying that Destruction Derby is not a showcase racing game for the Saturn in terms of its looks. Whilst the cars look reasonable for what they are, and the damage actually looks pretty good as it builds up, the rest of the visuals are actually pretty much underwhelming. The game suffers from a lot of pop-up within the courses and the scenery, which to me is pretty much unacceptable when you consider the tracks are actually really small. There's also a lot of pop-up on all of the text for the barricades as well on every single course, although this is actually present on the PlayStation version as well. You'll also notice that when a lot of cars are on screen smashing into one another, the game of course suffers from a fair bit of slowdown, but it does in general actually run at a reasonable frame rate. It's actually fairly playable. It's by no means as smooth though as the PlayStation version, but it is without a doubt a much better running game than the likes of Hardcore 4x4. In terms of the shadows for the cars, they're actually solid black, which is something I much prefer over those disgusting mesh effect transparencies that we saw in most Saturn games. But the exhaust effects for the cars are pretty hideous, as they are simply cloud-shaped sprites coming out of the backs, and it looks pretty much very cartoonish as far as I'm concerned. One of the actual strangest things though with the game you will notice is when you're racing around the tracks and the outside of the track looks like it's moving forwards and backwards or rotating as you race around the course. It's very strange, and if you stare at it, it's actually got a somewhat disorientating effect in my opinion. I actually went back and played the PlayStation version. I have to play in the Saturn version to check, and it didn't really seem like it's on that version, so I'm guessing it's just down to the game being poorly converted and probably having just a lack of effort put into it. The only other thing I want to mention visually is the fact that at times the hit detection is pretty ropey as well, and some of the time you can quite literally drive through another car. And I think overall I'd be fair in saying that the Saturn version of Destruction Derby, certainly in terms of its looks at least, is not particularly impressive.
Watch those barriers. They'll only slow you down. Nice. Ooh.
So moving on to the sound effects and music next, and I think I'd be fair in saying that Destruction Derby doesn't really improve when we get to this area, and there are several reasons for that. We'll start with the fact that the commentator just simply doesn't sound very good. He doesn't sound very comfortable in what he's saying, and he doesn't say enough. In fact, he may as well just not be here. Now, in terms of the actual sound effects within the races, they actually sound okay. There's nothing wrong with them. There just isn't enough. The game is really lacking, and it kind of kills the atmosphere in all fairness. There should be far more smashes and bangs as the cars race around the tracks. It's actually quite similar to the original Wipeout in this aspect, because I felt that that game was lacking in the sound effects too. And of course that brings us on to the music, and the fact that the music just doesn't fit this game. It actually sounds reasonably good. It's perfectly acceptable for the time period, but it's got this techno bopping style feel to it, and it would be much better suited in a game like High Octane or Wipeout itself. It doesn't suit a destruction-based racing game. This game would have benefited massively for some more rockin' tunes, similar to what we'd seen on Rock and Roll Racing a few weeks back. But of course, these are just my opinions, and music is subjective. So what I'll do is give you some examples of the tracks within the game so you can make up your own mind. So moving on to the gameplay next, and you may be surprised when I tell you it actually plays okay. In fact, I think it plays as well as you'd expect it to. These cars are relatively sluggish and unresponsive, exactly what they'd probably be like in real life. So in that regard, I think they nailed it to perfection. It's quite easy to pick up and play, and it's not very difficult at all to start winning races and progress through the leagues when you're in a championship. Now, in terms of the variety of the gameplay, there's a little bit, because if you pick wrecking racing, you need to get points by damaging your opponents within the set number of laps. If you pick stock car racing, it's just a simple, straightforward race to the finish line to try and come first. If you pick the destruction derby, you're put in the bowl and you need to try and destroy all the other cars and be the last one standing, and also get as many points as you can. You've also got time trial mode as well, which is just simply trying to get the best possible lap time. So there is a little bit of variety in the gameplay in that regard. It's by no means the best playing racing game on the system, that's for sure, but again, it is by no means the worst, and like I said, it is actually relatively enjoyable for what it is. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and we've got 3 cars and 5 tracks with a few variations of the tracks as well, which is basically the same as the PlayStation. There is no additional content in this version of the game, which is very disappointing when it came out almost a year later. In fact, the game actually has less content because the ability to have 2-player races via link-up has been removed. That was in the PlayStation version, but it's not in the Saturn version. And also the pit lane feature where you could view the damaged cars after the races has been removed as well. I've no idea why they would take this out, and it's actually very frustrating when a game comes out almost a year later and it has no additional content and has actually had things removed from the game. It just leaves a very unpleasant taste in your mouth. In terms of the main mode of play, that's either the championship for stock car racing or for wrecking racing. You start in Division 5, you have to try and win each division until you get to Division 1. You win that and then you'll get a well done screen with a trophy and some credits play, and it's actually rather unsatisfying and unfulfilling to complete the game because it doesn't really leave you with any kind of sense of achievement. In fact, the stock car racing is actually fairly easy to win from Division 5 up to Division 1 in about an hour or so. You can do that. The wrecking racings are much more difficult because you need to try and get lots of damage inflicted on the other cars. And in terms of long-term appeal, I don't really think the game has it. I don't find the Destruction Derby mode particularly enjoyable on this game. I don't find the duel mode where you're in a Destruction Derby just in a one-on-one situation particularly enjoyable either. The definite meat on the bones is just a championship in terms of stock car racing or wrecking racing, and I feel once you've done it once, you're probably not going to want to do it again. So overall, I don't think Destruction Derby performs that well in terms of content and lifespan. So like always, that leaves us with our 2 final questions. Is Destruction Derby still worth playing today, and does it have the quality to make either our PAL or our worldwide Sega Saturn top 10s? Now, before I answer both of those questions, I just want to talk about the game a little bit in general, because the Saturn version, like I said previously, came out almost 1 year after the PlayStation version originally did in Japan. And for that, we've got a game that looks and performs worse, sounds worse in my opinion, plays worse, and has less content, which is incredibly disappointing and very frustrating. I can imagine this is not the kind of game that you want to show your friend who owned a PlayStation at the time, because he would probably laugh at you and say, "You've waited all of this time for this?" You'd probably be quite embarrassed. Now, casting all of that aside, is the game still worth playing today is a big question, because there isn't many games like this on the Saturn. And if you were looking for a racing experience like this on the console, it's really just this, or possibly Impact Racing is probably the closest thing that comes to mind off the top of my head. Now, some of the modes on this game don't really offer any replay value. I feel the Destruction Derby isn't particularly entertaining, and even the Total Destruction and dual options for that don't really add anything to it. You're really just looking at the championships for stock car racing and wrecking racing, and for me the standard racing is actually just much better to play. I don't really enjoy the wrecking racing at all. The way to accumulate points is fairly tough in all fairness, and it's very inconsistent. So I couldn't really recommend that you go back and play this game, not on the Saturn at least. And in fact, if you own a PlayStation as well, you've got Destruction Derby 2 and Destruction Derby Raw, and they're both better games than this as well. So it would be very difficult for me to say, yes, go back and play this game. And of course, finally, that means we've got to ask the question, does it make our PAL Top 10 or our Worldwide Top 10? Obviously, it doesn't have the quality to enter either. It's by no means the worst racing game I have played on the console, but it is nowhere near the best racing game either, let alone one of the top 10 games on the system in general. It's simply too flawed, and in general it's just a poor conversion of the PlayStation game, which was not even a fantastic game in its own right. But of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone. If yours differ, or of course if you agree with me, like always, let me know with a comment down below. I read every single comment that people post. I genuinely do. I love to hear other people's thoughts on all of the games that I review. That is it for this week. Like always, I'll be back in the near future with another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.